Hello my friends and welcome to FISHTORY. Today we're talking about poo and other things. Today we're talking about managing debris in your aquarium. So that means gravel vacuuming, water changes, things like that. We're also going to talk about some ways you can manage things organically with organisms, creatures in your aquarium, as well as hardware like power heads to move things around with flow in your aquarium. And we're going to talk about how you clean your aquarium if you have a glass or gravel-based aquarium, maybe a sand-based aquarium, and only about an inch of it at the bottom. That is one type of aquarium that's fine to keep. Maybe you have plants, maybe you don't. But if you have that kind of aquarium, it is going to be much simpler, but much more often that you're going to be managing that waste and debris, because it's going to become toxic and full of ammonia, nitrates, and nitrites over time. And simply getting rid of it is the best way to handle it. However, if you have an aquarium with substrate that is layered and that is planned out to accumulate this debris, which we call Mulm, M-U-L-M, or organic debris and biological debris that is full of nutrients that has been broken down and synthesized into its key ingredients from a less nutritious waste byproduct that it once was, that mulm can then become fertilizer just like root tabs or aqua soil in your aquarium. So how do you want to handle the unsightly debris and mulm that's building up at the bottom of a tank when you're trying to actually build up mulm over time? It's kind of a catch-22 because you have to clean some of it up, but some of it needs to be fine enough that it can become the layers in your aquarium and then fertilize your plants over time. So we're going to talk about all of that, and we're going to end all the way on the deep end of the spectrum where we're talking about deep substrate and anoxic filtration, where you're actually counting on the substrate to do some of the filtration for you. And it is very important how you handle this substrate and how it matures and how you clean it and manage it in the year to 2 years that it's becoming fully mature, so that it can live 10, 15 years as a beautiful planted aquarium and ecosystem. So let's jump in, and we'll start with the simplest aquariums substrate-wise, and we'll work our way up to the complex substrates. So it'll go glass and gravel or sand aquariums, how to deal with those, the different way you would deal with layered substrate or aqua soil with a sand cap or sand with an aqua soil cap, however you want to do it, and how you would deal with a more natural aquarium where you're trying not to do a whole lot of managing water changes, cleaning with a gravel vac, and you're trying to actually build up that mulm into a rich organic layer, and the things we need to have in place for that to go successfully. All right, so first off, I want to show you if we're gravel vacuuming with the standard gravel vac on sand in a very, very shallow substrate. This is a tank that barely has enough sand to even cover the bottom. Yet, debris and mulm and algae are building up in it because it's an old tank. So we're going to start the suction, and just like we're mowing the lawn, we're going to go from left to right or front to back or back to front, however you want to think of it, and we're going to suck up the debris and let it whirl around like that game where you grab a dollar, and we're going to let the heavy sand kind of swirl midway, and then all the lighter loose debris and waste that creates ammonia and more of the toxic waste products is going to go up the tube and back out into our bucket. Now, how do you control the flow of this water? Well, you can pinch your cord just like this. Some siphons now come with other mechanisms and valves, but the best way I've ever found is an oldie but goodie. You just pinch the tube with your hand, and this is really crucial to understand because you can get stuff like algae that's free floating with that by just letting off your grip. And you can also take things like rocks or the sidewall of the aquarium and actually scrape the side and kind of get a little bit of it scraped off and at the bottom of your siphon, and then you let off on the pinch and it will suck up all that debris and go down into your bucket. So by doing this, we're literally taking out all the waste. None of the mulm in this tank is going to be left over to be for plants. any of the plants you're seeing in this tank are simply here just because they're living off the nutrients in the water. Just like Java Fern, chain sword is very good, Valsinaria is very good at living just off whatever's in the water. The fact that it's rooted to the rocks and or some of the sand is kind of beside the point. It's not doing anything for those plants because they're not really feeding by the roots. They're feeding by the nitrates and nitrites and ammonia in the water and the nutrients in the water. So if we were doing this on another tank and we didn't want to go very deep into the substrate, you can also just hover right over the surface like this, and see how the sand's barely dancing? You can just let off pinching down as hard and then, squeeze it harder if you need to, and then get all that debris and water with waste particles in it and silt and debris. You can get it to go up into the tank just by letting it dance around and kind of learning to finesse that tube. See that big clump of algae there? So you can actually clean that, but over time that can end up clogging your siphon, and if that's the case, you may need to reach in there and unclog it, just like happened just now, because I'm so smart. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to show you guys that substrate in an aquarium can be very thick. It can have layers that are not oxygenated, that are all the way down here. It can have layers of iron and sulfur and different minerals that the bacteria have actually pre-sorted for us into bands or layers for us. But when we're making an aquarium that looks like this, over time, all this mulm and debris or waste that the fish make, that the plants make, that their food makes, we have to manage this, right? And the answer is not through big water changes, because that could be a shock to the system. And we've got all this biological filtration on the filter back there and on the algae and on all the surfaces. In fact, this is an aquarium that doesn't even need mechanical filtration. We can simply use the surface area and the algae in here, and the plants will detoxify a lot of the nitrates, nitrites, and other stuff. But we still have to care for this mulm. So I like to use a gravel vac, and I kind of just set things aside, and every few weeks I'll clean a portion. So what we want is this mulm to settle down in the sand and reach this layer down here. So what I usually do is I just kind of stir it around, and because sand is less dense than that mulm, that the heavy pieces of that mulm or silt and debris will end up making it to the bottom of wherever I'm stirring or digging. Then I'll let it calm down, and as you can see over here, it'll be in the water column, it'll be okay for your fish, but then I will remove whatever's lightest and whatever's in here that in my mind could be an issue for my fish, and whatever's newest. So if I see anything I can recognize, like scraps of food or leaves, I will actually suck those up. This is also when I'll decide if I want to remove algae or any decor or anything like that. And you can kind of gradually do this so you never shock the whole system. But if you see a nice section of mulm waiting for you like this, you can kind of, slowly, very slowly churn your sand cap. And if you have Malaysian trumpet snails, those are the best thing you could hope for, because every night they're going to go from underground to above ground in the sand, silt, and layers, and the densest silt is going to work its way down in their trail. So meanwhile, we've got all this silt and cloudy water falling just like it would in the aquarium, and we can just shake our gravel vac or our turkey baster, and then we can take the waste and we can get rid of it into our wastewater bucket. Over time, this will produce actual layers of very nutritious silt. It is full of microorganisms, nutrients, and all sorts of stuff that you're just not going to get from substrate that is simply made out of inorganic sand or glass marbles or fluorite or something like that. Here we have a living substrate that stratifies into different layers. Now, another type of substrate I want to show you is a substrate that builds up over time in gravel. So this aquarium here was simply gravel originally. So how is it that I got it to be a rich, layered mulm substrate over time? Well, I have those same trumpet snails working and doing their job. And I also have a layer of Substrate or Java moss or plants, they can be stem plants too, causing a buffer here in between the open water and the fish, and any of the waste they're creating get processed by the shrimp, by the snails, and by the bacteria and algae and all the other things first, and then it slowly kind of works its way down to the substrate. And you can see over here where there isn't much, it actually builds up a little high. And so every once in a while, I'll go in there and I'll actually use a gravel vac and pick up anything, like I said, anything that I can recognize by sight. So if it looks like a twig or a leaf of something that's decaying, I'll usually remove those things and just allow that silt of fine material to build up. And likewise, you can see here how there's a yellow layer building up underneath the main silt and mulm. That is actual nutrients that bacteria has stratified into sulfur, and another layer of bacteria may be using the nitrates that we don't want in the tank. But nature is incredible, and with a bit of time, and we started with gravel. What about the tanks where we do a lasagna method and we start with bigger rocks and we had kind of these layers that looked so nice and organized at one point? Well, this is what those look like in 6 or 7 years of this same style of keeping, and only removing the biggest pieces. And you have microbes and microorganisms that sometimes are creepy crawly, sometimes they're considered pests, but they're also an indicator of, do you have too much organic debris? Is there too much actual, vegetative matter that has not been broken down thoroughly enough? You want to be seeing these teeny tiny white hair or thread-like worms like this, and not the planaria, which have a triangular head if you look carefully. Let's try to get that in focus. These guys eat biological waste, and they're going to be a sign, as well as Hydra, that you probably have too much organic waste. Now, in the meantime, all this time, the lower layers of your substrate are going to be packing away that nitrate and nitrite into ammonia again in a deep layer that the plant roots can then access and flourish from in the future. And it's constantly being recharged by that debris that we're letting fall down to it. So here you can see this debris of fine silt is maybe 1 inch deep here, maybe 2 or 3 inches here, but you can see the silt made it all the way down into this area and this area and this area, probably 5 inches deep, whereas in this aquarium that's around the same age, we're only making it around 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep, versus 3 or 4 inches of fertilized rich soil here and 6 or 7 inches total of substrate. So let's finish off by looking at this in its final form. So yes, this kind of aquarium, as well as this aquarium that is getting there eventually, and this one's going to have CO2 in it. These types of aquarium, along with high light, are able to produce a massive amount of plants and be stocked with a massive amount of fish that produce quite a bit of waste. And this tank here is over 8 years old now, and you can see that as we go down in the tank, you can see that this stuff produces a light fluffy mulm. And you can see yet again, we have that plant layer like I showed you in the other tank. We have the Substrate, we have the stem plants, we have some moss, and it's helping filter the light stuff out at the top so that plants and snails and shrimp can eat that, or I can gravel vac it. I can get at it with my turkey baster right here, and then I can deal with it before it actually falls and becomes something a lot more dense. So as I show you here, right at the edge of the mulm, you can actually use that and remove as much as you want based on your preferences of how it looks visually. But here you can see there's a lot of debris in there, and it's bigger and chunkier than just silt. It's a bit more chunky plant material, and you can kind of recognize some of the debris in there. But we take this, we put it in a waste bucket, yet again, and we let the deeper stuff, we let that be. And here you can really see how iron and sulfur and different layers and different minerals actually come out as different bands. in your aquarium over time if you don't disrupt it. So this is what allows these plants to get all those nutrients they need. This one, however, has not had liquid fertilizer for over 2 years and has not had CO2 for over a year either. So everything you're seeing is just this aquarium running on the nutrient-rich substrate and water top-offs. And it's due for a water top-off right now. Having all these plants, they will dilute and clean all of the ammonia, the nitrates, the nitrites, and all of these plants serve as surface area to detoxify those chemicals as well. Even algae, as unsightly as it can be, if you thought the other tanks may be unsightly, it's doing a job because it's a plant too. It's just a very tiny plant. So I hope these tips help you out, and I hope you enjoy your aquarium, and I hope I'll see you on the next episode of FISHTORY.